Imagine standing in front of two doors. One leads to a room of certainty, predictable outcomes, stable routines, and the comfort of knowing exactly what will happen next. The other leads to a room of uncertainty, potential risks, unknown variables, but also opportunities for reward. Now here is the paradox. Most people, when faced with this choice, believe they are rational beings who weigh pros and cons, carefully calculating which door best serves their interest. Yet, in truth, invisible psychological forces are tugging at their decision long before logic enters the room. The hand that pushes the door open is guided not just by conscious thought, but by persuasion. Subtle cues, unspoken norms, and the gravity of influence that we rarely acknowledge but always obey. Persuasion is not about manipulation in the crass sense. It is the architecture of choice itself. It is the way social whispers echo louder than facts, the way scarcity burns desire into the mind, and the way identity binds us to actions we may not have chosen otherwise. The unsettling truth is this: you have never made a choice entirely on your own. Every decision, whether buying a product, voting for a leader, or even choosing your friends, is colored by the fingerprints of others. Consider the last time you purchased something you didn't truly need. Was it the sleek design that pulled you in? Or was it the quiet assurance that others owned it too, that possessing it aligned you with a tribe? Humans are not lone decision-makers. We are social creatures designed to attune ourselves to signals around us. Persuasion is not external. It is woven into the fabric of who we are. And here is where the psychology of persuasion, illuminated by researchers like Jonah Berger, reveals something profound. Influence is not a trick played upon us. It is a current we are immersed in. The danger comes not from being influenced, but from being blind to how it happens. To ignore this force is to misunderstand not only the world but ourselves. Now imagine persuasion as a river. Most people float downstream without realizing the current exists. But those who understand its flow, the mechanics of attention, memory, and emotion, can learn to navigate it, to harness it, and sometimes to redirect it. The power of persuasion is neither inherently good nor evil. It is a tool. The same psychological levers that can sell cigarettes can also mobilize civil rights movements. The same mechanisms that compel a child to crave candy can compel entire nations to rally for justice. At its core, persuasion works because humans are not purely rational beings. The Enlightenment dream of the human as a calculating machine has always been flawed. We are, instead, storytellers. We seek meaning more than accuracy, belonging more than independence, certainty more than truth. Our brains, magnificent as they are, shortcut complexity with biases, heuristics, and emotions. Persuasion exploits, or rather, engages these shortcuts. One of the earliest insights into this came not from modern psychology but from ancient philosophy. Aristotle described rhetoric as the art of persuasion, built on ethos, credibility, pathos, emotion, and logos, reason. He knew, even in antiquity, that facts alone rarely move people. It is the interplay of trust, feeling, and logic that bends minds and shapes behavior. Centuries later, we are still grappling with the same realization. People are not swayed by truth alone, but by truth woven into narrative, embodied by someone they believe, and infused with emotion they cannot ignore. So the first question is not, how does persuasion work? But rather, how could it not? How could beings designed to survive in tribes, to imitate, to seek approval, to avoid rejection, ever escape the gravitational pull of influence? The answer is simple: we cannot. But what we can do is illuminate it, study it, and in doing so, reclaim agency over the very forces that once steered us blindly. Picture yourself walking through a grocery store. You came in for milk and bread, yet by the time you reach the register, your cart is mysteriously filled with snacks, a magazine, and perhaps a bottle of wine you hadn't planned to buy. You could swear it was your choice. You felt the impulse, you picked the items, you justified them. But beneath that surface decision lies a hidden orchestra of cues. The placement of items at eye level, the smell of fresh bread pumped through hidden vents, the limited time offer signs that whisper urgency to your subconscious. Persuasion is not loud. It is subtle, ambient, invisible, and it thrives in the silence between awareness and action. Jonah Berger and others in the field of behavioral science point to one critical truth. Much of what drives us happens below the level of conscious thought. Our brains, faced with the exhausting flood of choices, rely on mental shortcuts, heuristics, to lighten the load. These shortcuts are efficient but vulnerable, making us susceptible to persuasion that feels like free will but is, in fact, engineered suggestion. Take social proof, one of the most powerful levers. When unsure what to do, humans look to others for guidance. It is why laughter tracks in sitcoms make us smile, why online reviews dictate our purchases, and why people donate more when told most others are donating too. Social proof bypasses deliberation. It is less about logic and more about belonging. The mind whispers, if others are doing it, it must be safe, it must be right. Another subconscious mechanism is scarcity. When something is limited, whether seats for a concert, a product line, or even attention from another person, its perceived value skyrockets. Scarcity speaks to the primal fear of missing out, the evolutionary anxiety that opportunities lost may never return. The irony, of course, is that scarcity need not be real. A countdown timer on a website, even if artificial, activates the same neurological urgency as genuine scarcity. Our subconscious does not discriminate. Then there is framing, the deceptively simple art of how information is presented. Imagine a surgeon telling you, this operation has a 90% survival rate. Relief floods your mind. Now imagine the same surgeon saying, this operation has a 10% fatality rate. Suddenly, anxiety coils in your chest. The facts are identical, yet the psychological response is worlds apart. Our subconscious does not deal in raw numbers. It responds to context, tone, and the emotions those words conjure. These mechanisms reveal a haunting reality. Persuasion often bypasses our rational defenses. We believe we are reasoning, but more often we are rationalizing, justifying choices already planted in us by subtle cues. Neuroscience shows that the brain makes many decisions milliseconds before we become aware of them. Persuasion works in that gap, influencing the hand that reaches for the product or the word that slips from our tongue before our conscious mind catches up. The philosopher David Hume once remarked, reason is, and ought only to be, the slave of the passions. His words echo today in psychology labs, where experiment after experiment shows that emotion drives decision-making, and reason merely justifies it afterward. Persuasion taps into that emotional bedrock. The longing for status, the fear of exclusion, the comfort of certainty. Yet here lies the subtlety. Persuasion is not coercion. No one is forcing the snack into your cart or the donation from your wallet. Instead, persuasion nudges. It bends probabilities. It arranges the environment so that certain choices feel more natural, more appealing, more inevitable. And when you make them, you feel ownership, not manipulation. This is why persuasion is so powerful. It works best when it feels invisible. Understanding this subconscious machinery does not strip us of agency. It equips us with awareness. To see the levers is to weaken their grip. And once we see them, the question transforms. Can we also learn to use them? Not just to resist persuasion, but to shape it deliberately, for ideas, causes, and visions that deserve to spread. This is where we turn next. From the silent mechanics to the art of crafting influence consciously, with intention rather than accident. Close your eyes and think of a story that changed the way you saw the world. Maybe it was a novel that pulled you into another reality, a film that left you speechless, or even a childhood parable whispered by a parent that still echoes in your decisions today. What was it about that story? Chances are, it wasn't the mere facts it contained. It was the narrative, the characters, the emotion, the way it slipped beneath your defenses and made you feel before it made you think. That is the art of persuasion. Not raw argument, but meaning sculpted into story. Humans are narrative creatures. We understand ourselves and others not through spreadsheets of data, but through tales of struggle, triumph, and transformation. Stories bind information to emotion, creating memory traces that outlast statistics. A study might show the dangers of climate change, but one child's story of losing her home to rising waters will move audiences to tears and to action. Persuasion works best when logic is wrapped in narrative skin. Symbols are equally powerful tools of influence. Consider the raised fist, the white dove, the national flag. These are not just images, they are vessels of collective identity. They condense vast emotions and shared histories into a single emblem. To wave a flag is not simply to display cloth. It is to declare belonging, to summon loyalty, to ignite passion. The great persuaders of history, from political leaders to social activists, understood the symbolic lexicon of their time and wielded it with precision. But persuasion is not only about collective symbols. It is also about personal identity. Jonah Berger emphasizes this truth. People don't just buy products, they buy versions of themselves. The sneakers you wear, the phone you carry, the music you stream, all broadcast signals of identity. To persuade someone, you don't just appeal to what they want, you appeal to who they want to be. This is why brands speak in archetypes. Nike doesn't just sell shoes, it sells victory and grit. Apple doesn't just sell devices, it sells creativity and rebellion. Influence takes root when people feel their choices align with the person they aspire to become. Think also about the rhythm of storytelling in persuasion. Great orators, from Martin Luther King Jr. to Winston Churchill, understood cadence, repetition, and contrast. King's "I have a dream" refrain worked not because it was new each time, but because its repetition carved the dream deeper into the psyche of listeners. Contrast sharpens attention. We will not falter and we will not fail. Persuasion is not merely what you say. It is how the words move through breath, pause, and rhythm, lodging themselves in memory. One might argue, however, that stories, symbols, and rhythms are tools of manipulation as much as inspiration. And this is true. The same persuasive artistry that fuels movements for justice can fuel propaganda for oppression. The ethical line is drawn not in the method but in the intent. To persuade is human. To deceive is a choice. At its best, persuasion is not about forcing agreement but about opening doors to new ways of seeing. It is about illuminating possibilities, offering frames that make the invisible visible. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche captured this spirit when he wrote, "We have art in order not to die of the truth." Art, like persuasion, softens truth into forms we can bear, forms we can embrace and act upon. So persuasion as art is not ornamental, it is essential. Without it, truth lies dormant, stripped of its power to move. With it, truth breathes, travels, and transforms. The task for anyone who wishes to persuade is to learn this artistry. To weave logic with emotion, identity with aspiration, symbol with story. Only then does persuasion transcend influence and become a force for change. And yet, knowing this, we must ask, what makes persuasion stick? What ensures that the story told today becomes the belief that shapes tomorrow? To answer this, we must move from the artistry of persuasion to the science of its persistence, the mechanisms of memory, habit, and social diffusion. Why is it that some messages ignite like wildfire, spreading from person to person, while others vanish as quickly as they arrive? Why do certain slogans, ideas, or images cling to our minds for decades, while others dissolve into forgetfulness within hours? The answer lies not merely in the art of persuasion, but in its endurance, how it embeds itself in memory, reshapes habit, and propagates through networks like a living contagion. The first key lies in memory. Our minds are selective archivists, storing only fragments of the flood of daily input. To endure, persuasion must attach itself to emotion, novelty, or relevance. A statistic may be impressive, but unless it stirs something visceral, it will evaporate. Emotional resonance acts as glue. We remember the story of Rosa Parks not because of transportation policy, but because her simple act of resistance embodied courage and injustice in a way numbers could not. Neuroscience shows that when emotions fire, memory encoding strengthens, the heart stamps impressions into the brain. Next comes habit. Persuasion that lasts does not merely inspire a single action. It alters routines. Consider the brilliance of the toothpaste industry in the early 20th century. Toothbrushing was not a widespread habit in America until advertisers linked the practice to freshness, confidence, and social acceptance. Once the routine was established, reinforced by the sensory cue of tingling mint, it became self-sustaining. Persuasion that reshapes daily patterns gains permanence because repetition weaves influence into the fabric of behavior. But perhaps the most powerful driver of endurance is social contagion. Jonah Berger emphasizes that ideas spread not just because they are persuasive, but because they are shareable. Humans are inherently social broadcasters. We do not simply consume information, we pass it along, often to signal identity, status, or belonging. A viral video, a trending hashtag, or even a whispered rumor travels because sharing it says something about who we are. Influence does not end with one person convinced. It begins there, diffusing through relationships, conversations, and communities. Think of influence as a spark on dry grass. For fire to spread, 3 conditions must align. The spark must catch, the wind must carry it, and the ground must be flammable. Likewise, persuasion endures when a message resonates with emotion, the spark, when networks provide pathways for sharing, the wind, and when cultural conditions make people receptive, the dry ground. Absent one of these, influence fades. Together, they can ignite revolutions. The philosopher John Stuart Mill once reflected on the diffusion of ideas, writing, "Genuine equality between human beings can only be achieved when opinion has made its way into the general mind of society." Mill understood that persuasion is not fulfilled at the moment of individual agreement. It matures when the idea embeds itself in the collective, when it becomes the air people breathe rather than the slogan they repeat. This endurance, however, reveals a double-edged sword. Just as liberating ideas can cascade through society, so too can dangerous falsehoods. Misinformation, once it acquires emotional resonance and social contagion, can spread with the same ferocity as truth. The persistence of conspiracy theories, urban legends, and propaganda shows us that endurance is neutral. It serves whichever message harnesses its mechanics. This is why awareness of persuasion's endurance is not only academic but urgent. So how does one ensure that a message not only persuades in the moment but lingers, spreads, and transforms? By uniting memory, habit, and contagion, craft a message that stirs emotion and identity. Anchor it in repeated practice or daily ritual. Ensure it travels easily through networks by making it simple to share, repeat, or display. In doing so, persuasion shifts from momentary influence to cultural presence. But one last question remains, perhaps the most crucial of all. If persuasion can endure, if it can ripple through memory, habit, and society, what responsibility comes with wielding such power? This takes us to the final step in our exploration, the ethics of persuasion, and the moral compass required to guide influence responsibly. Picture a torch in the dark. In the right hands, it guides the lost, illuminates hidden dangers, and lights the path forward. In the wrong hands, it ignites destruction. Persuasion is that torch. It is power distilled into words, symbols, and actions that shape how people see the world and who they become within it. The pressing question, then, is not whether persuasion works, it always does, but how it is used and to what end. The psychology of persuasion reveals a breathtaking truth. We hold levers that can stir emotion, bind identity, and ripple through entire cultures. But to grasp those levers without moral reflection is to invite peril. History is heavy with examples. The same psychological principles that mobilized movements for freedom were twisted by regimes into tools of propaganda. The same social contagion that spreads hope can also spread hate. Persuasion is not inherently noble or sinister. It is neutral. Its character depends on the intent of the persuader. Here lies the ethical crux. Influence is asymmetric. A single skilled persuader can sway thousands, even millions, who remain unaware of the mechanisms at play. This imbalance of awareness creates responsibility. To persuade ethically is not to abandon influence but to wield it transparently, to invite choice rather than strip it away. Transparency does not mean sterile honesty stripped of art. It means aligning persuasion with truth rather than deceit, with empowerment rather than exploitation. An ethical persuader asks not only, will this work? But also, should it? Should this product, message, or idea gain ground? Will it enhance human flourishing or diminish it? These questions separate leadership from manipulation, guidance from exploitation. The philosopher Immanuel Kant provides a timeless compass here. He wrote, "Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means." Applied to persuasion, this principle reminds us, people are not pawns. To persuade ethically is to respect autonomy, to honor the dignity of those influenced, and to ensure that persuasion serves them rather than simply using them. But ethical persuasion is not merely about avoiding harm, it is about actively choosing good. It asks, how can influence be a catalyst for justice, compassion, and progress? Think of leaders who galvanized civil rights movements, educators who inspired generations, or doctors who persuaded communities to adopt life-saving practices. Their persuasion was not neutral, it was purposeful, rooted in service to others. For each of us, the responsibility is twofold. As persuaders, we must craft influence with integrity, using the tools of psychology not as hidden shackles but as bridges to understanding. As recipients of persuasion, we must cultivate awareness, sharpening our defenses against manipulation, while remaining open to influence that uplifts and enlightens. There is one final paradox to embrace. The more consciously we study persuasion, the freer we become. Influence ceases to be an invisible current dragging us along. It becomes a force we can navigate with intention. Awareness transforms passivity into agency. The torch no longer blinds, it guides. So let us return to the image of the two doors from the beginning. One door, the door of blindness, allows persuasion to rule us silently, shaping choices we never question. The other door, the door of awareness, invites us to study, to reflect, to use persuasion deliberately and ethically. Neither door erases influence, it is inescapable. But one path enslaves us to it, while the other allows us to hold the torch and decide where to shine it. Persuasion is the unseen architecture of human life. To understand it is to reclaim authorship over our choices. To wield it ethically is to shape not only our own destiny but the future of those who walk beside us. The question is no longer whether persuasion governs us, it always has, always will. The question is, what will we do with the torch?